Hi, I'm Thomas Kelly,
I'm Jennifer Kelly.
and this podcast is about a famous educational theorist, and ours was Lawrence Kohlberg. Lawrence, or Larry, was born in October 25th of 1927. He actually died January 19th of 1987 from a suicide in which he actually drowned himself in the Boston Harbor. He was born in the Bronxville of New York. He attended the University of Chicago, and he actually graduated with a bachelor's degree in 1 year. He later ended up teaching there at the University of Chicago and also at Harvard University. He was also named one of the 30 most eminent psychologists of the 20th century.
He was a close follower of Piaget and his theory of cognitive development. He was originally interested in moral psychology, and then he went further into moral education. He contracted a tropical parasite in 1971, and that is what led to his suicide eventually. He suffered from pain and depression from the parasite, and he had actually checked himself or asked for a day of leave from the hospital, and that is the day he committed suicide. In the rest of this podcast, we'll discuss his six stages of moral development and how his theory affects middle school education and teachers. Kohlberg is most known for his theory of the 6 stages of moral development. Those stages are obedience and punishment orientation, individualism and exchange, good interpersonal relationships, maintaining the social order, social contract and individual rights, and universal principles.
The first stage deals with children having complete obedience to rules and authority due to their fear of punishment. His second stage is pursuing concrete interests while knowing others are doing the same. It is also the start of decision making.
The third stage is defined by trying to live up to expectations. This is done by having good behavior and motives and fostering close relationships. The fourth stage deals with the concern for maintaining the social system in order to promote social order and welfare.
The fifth stage is where you judge the moral worth of societal rules and values and see if they are then consistent with fundamental values. The final stage is structured by universal principles of justice and respect for human autonomy.
Kohlberg hoped that these 6 stages could provide a framework for moral education. He also thought that moral education would flourish in an environment in which everyone had decision-making power.
Instead of seeing morality as a concept adults impose on children, Kohlberg believed children make their own moral judgments. The moral discussion approach was his first research-based contribution to moral education.
The most significant contribution to moral education that he made was the just community approach.
And now we're just going to talk about maybe something we kind of learned while researching Lawrence Kohlberg and how we think it applies to both teaching the students and how the students could react to our teaching.
We mentioned the moral discussion approach that Kohlberg had introduced, and it was a way to offer educators a way of promoting moral development to higher stages of moral reasoning through thoughtful and critical dialogue about moral issues. He introduced he introduced morals to the classroom instead of and letting students foster their learning more so than just the teacher telling them.
Two things that I actually picked up that I thought were really cool. We actually already talked about them in the slides. But the way how he said that he believed that the moral education would flourish in an environment and where everybody had decision-making power. And to me, I think that talks about how, as a teacher, I think your kids will respond to when you let the students make some decisions in your classroom. I mean, ultimately, obviously, the teacher has the ultimate say. But, when there's some kind of back and forth conversation, I think it really does good on both parts. I also like how Kohlberg looked at morality, whereas students actually can generate their own morality at a young age, and it's not necessarily always imposed on them by their parents. So it just kind of shows you that students at this age can critically think and make up their own kind of morality using things. They use their parents, they also use what they see, but how they can actually generate their own critical thought for themselves. That pretty much wraps up our presentation. We hope you learned something. We learned a little bit, or a lot actually, and it's gives you a different way to look at things. So thanks a lot.